The coffee was still warm in my hand when I saw my own face staring back at me from the newspaper. Not a feature article, not a profile piece celebrating my 27 years building Holloway Insurance Group from a one-woman operation into the largest independent brokerage in Charlotte, North Carolina. No, it was an obituary. Margaret Ellen Holloway, 58, of Myers Park, passed away peacefully on November 15th, surrounded by family. She is survived by her loving husband David, her stepchildren Carla and Michael, and her brother Thomas. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. My brain was still trying to process what my eyes were seeing, trying to find the rational explanation, the misprint, the joke. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. The date on that obituary was November 15th. Today was November 14th. Someone had written my death announcement for tomorrow. Before I continue, I need you to understand something. I'm not the kind of woman who panics. I built a business from nothing. I survived my first husband leaving me with a newborn and $47,000 in debt. I negotiated my way through the 2008 crash when half the insurance agencies in Charlotte closed their doors. I've sat across from lawyers, accountants, hospital administrators, and more than a few liars in my 58 years. So when I tell you that finding my own obituary didn't make me scream or cry or call the police immediately, I need you to understand that's not because I wasn't afraid. It's because I was already calculating. I was sitting in my usual booth at Harper's Diner, the place I'd had breakfast every Thursday morning for 19 years. Same booth, same order, black coffee, wheat toast, scrambled eggs. The Charlotte Observer was spread out on the table like it always was, and I'd been flipping through to the business section when my eye caught the obituary page. I don't know why I looked at the obituaries that morning. I never look at obituaries, but something pulled my attention to the right side of the page, third column down. And there I was. My professional headshot from 3 years ago, the one we used for the company website. The one David had said made me look distinguished. The obituary was detailed, professionally written. It mentioned my maiden name, Brennan, my hometown, Asheville, my degree from Wake Forest. It mentioned the founding of Holloway Insurance in 1997. It mentioned David, my husband of 32 years. It mentioned his children, who I'd raised as my own since they were 6 and 8. It even mentioned my brother Thomas, who I hadn't spoken to in 4 years after a falling out over our mother's estate. Someone had done their research. Someone had written this carefully, lovingly, as if they knew me. And someone had submitted it to the newspaper with a publication date of tomorrow. The waitress refilled my coffee. "You okay, Mrs. Holloway? You look like you've seen a ghost." I folded the newspaper closed. "Just tired, Linda. Long week." But my mind was racing through the possibilities. A prank? Who would think this was funny? And more importantly, how would they get it published in an actual newspaper? The Observer has submission guidelines, verification processes. A mistake. Someone at the paper mixed up dates, grabbed the wrong file? But that would mean someone had already written my obituary and submitted it. That would mean someone was expecting me to die soon enough that having a pre-written obituary made sense. Or, and this is the thought that made me set down my coffee cup very carefully, because my hands were finally starting to shake. This was exactly what it looked like. Someone wanted me dead by tomorrow, and they'd already set the stage for the aftermath. That's when I realized that the real question wasn't who had done this. The real question was why. And the answer to that question was going to determine whether I was alive to read the paper on November 16th. Let me tell you who I was before I became a woman reading her own death announcement over scrambled eggs. I was born Margaret Ellen Brennan in Asheville, North Carolina, in 1966. My father worked for the paper mill until his back gave out when I was 12, and my mother cleaned houses for the families in Biltmore Village, the ones who lived in those beautiful Tudor-style homes with gardens that went on forever. I learned early that there were two kinds of people in this world: the ones who owned things and the ones who cleaned up after them. I decided I was going to be the first kind, not out of greed, out of survival, out of watching my mother come home with her hands cracked and bleeding, smelling like other people's furniture polish, while my father sat in his recliner pretending his spine wasn't disintegrating because he couldn't afford the surgery. I put myself through Wake Forest on scholarships and waitressing jobs, graduated with a degree in business administration in 1988, and got hired as a junior account manager at a mid-sized insurance firm in Charlotte. I was good at it. Not because I was a natural salesperson. I've never been what you'd call charming, but because I understood risk. I understood that people buy insurance because they're afraid of losing everything, and I could look them in the eye and tell them honestly what they needed to protect themselves. I met my first husband, Paul Tremaine, in 1989. He was handsome and confident and told me I was the smartest woman he'd ever met. We got married 6 months later. I was 23 and stupid in love. Paul turned out to be a gambler and a liar, not violent, just weak. The kind of man who'd tell you he was working late when he was actually at a poker game in someone's basement, losing our rent money. I found out I was pregnant with our daughter Emma the same week I found out he'd cleaned out our savings account, $12,000, and lost it all on a sure thing at the track. He left 3 months before Emma was born, moved to Florida with a woman he'd met at a casino. I never saw him again, and honestly, that was the best gift he ever gave me. So there I was, 24 years old, pregnant, alone, and $47,000 in debt between Paul's gambling losses and the medical bills from a complicated pregnancy. Here's what I did. I didn't cry. I didn't call my mother for money she didn't have. I made a plan. I worked until the day I went into labor. I went back to work 6 weeks after Emma was born, with her in a carrier next to my desk because I couldn't afford childcare. I paid off the debt in 4 years by living in a 1-bedroom apartment and eating rice and beans for dinner most nights. And in 1997, when I was 31, I took every penny I'd saved, $23,000, and started Holloway Insurance Group. I know what you're thinking. How is it Holloway if I didn't meet David until later? Because I didn't meet David Holloway. I built the business myself and chose the name because Brennan Insurance sounded too small, too personal. Holloway sounded established, substantial, like it had been there for generations. When I met David in 2002, at a Chamber of Commerce mixer of all places, I'd already been running Holloway Insurance for 5 years. We had 3 employees, a proper office in South Park, and a client list that included some of the biggest small businesses in Charlotte. David was a commercial real estate attorney, tall, silver-gray hair even at 38, with this warm smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was a widower raising 2 kids alone. Carla was 14, Michael was 12, and he told me on our 3rd date that he'd never met a woman like me. "You don't need anyone," he said. "That's what I love about you. You're complete." We got married 8 months later. I adopted his kids a year after that, though Carla never quite warmed to me, never quite stopped seeing me as the woman who'd replaced her mother. And here's the thing about David. He was good to me. For 30 years, he was good to me. He supported my business. He respected my independence. He never complained about the long hours or the client dinners or the fact that I made more money than he did. He was my partner in everything. At least that's what I believed, until I found my own obituary in the newspaper. I didn't go to the office that morning. Instead, I drove to the Charlotte Observer's headquarters on South Tryon Street. I told myself I was being proactive, that I was simply going to sort out this bizarre administrative error. But somewhere deeper, in the part of my brain that had survived Paul Tremaine and the debt and the years of building something from nothing, that part knew this wasn't a mistake. The receptionist at the Observer was a young woman with bright red lipstick and an expression of practiced patience. "I need to speak with someone in your obituary department," I said. "There's been an error." "What kind of error?" "My obituary was published today. I'm quite clearly not dead." Her eyes widened. To her credit, she recovered quickly. Let me get someone." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Gerald Hutchins, the obituary editor. He was in his 60s, balding, with the tired eyes of someone who'd spent too many years reading about death. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, spreading his hands. "I can only apologize. This is unprecedented. I've been doing this job for 23 years, and I've never had a living person's obituary published prematurely." "How did it happen?" He pulled up something on his computer. "The obituary was submitted through our standard online portal 3 days ago, paid for in advance. The requested publication date was November 15th. Today is the 14th. "I know." He looked genuinely embarrassed. "We had a system upgrade last week. There seems to have been a glitch in how dates were processed. Anything scheduled for tomorrow, accidentally published in today's edition." "So, someone actually submitted my obituary 3 days ago, expecting it to run tomorrow?" "That appears to be the case." "Who submitted it?" He hesitated. "I'm not sure I can—" "Mr. Hutchins." I leaned forward. "Someone wrote my death announcement with a date of tomorrow. If that person was expecting me to die tomorrow, I think I have a right to know who they are." He studied me for a long moment. Then he turned his computer screen toward me. The submission came from a David Holloway. He listed himself as the surviving spouse. The drive home took 30 minutes. I don't remember any of it. I pulled into the driveway of the house David and I had shared for 28 years. A beautiful craftsman-style home in Myers Park that I'd paid for with the profits from Holloway Insurance. David was at work. He was always at work on Thursdays, at his law firm downtown. I went straight to his home office. For 30 years, I'd respected his privacy. His office was his space, just like my home study was mine. I'd never once gone through his desk, his files, his computer. I'd never had a reason to. Now I had a reason. His desk was organized, the way David organized everything. Neat stacks, labeled folders, everything in its place. I started with the drawers. Bills, tax documents, legal correspondence. Nothing unusual. Then I found the locked drawer, bottom right. A small brass lock that I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I'd noticed it and never thought to question it. David was a lawyer. Of course he had confidential documents. I went to the kitchen, found a thin metal skewer, and came back. The lock was cheap. It took me 30 seconds to pop it open. Inside was a manila folder labeled Holloway Estate Planning. I pulled it out and opened it. The first document was a life insurance policy. Not the one I knew about. The $500,000 policy that David and I had taken out together 10 years ago. This was a new policy, dated 8 months ago. $2 million. On my life. With David as the sole beneficiary. I kept flipping. There was a rider attached, dated 6 months ago. It specified that the policy would pay out in full in the event of accidental death or natural causes confirmed by medical examination. There was a handwritten note clipped to the rider. Condition clause satisfied. Waiting period complete. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. I kept digging. The next document made my stomach drop. It was a medical report from Charlotte Presbyterian Hospital, dated 4 months ago. The patient name was Margaret Ellen Holloway. According to this report, I had been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. I had never been to Charlotte Presbyterian in my life. I had never been diagnosed with anything other than high blood pressure and mild arthritis. I'd had my annual physical 2 months ago, and Dr. Patterson had told me I was in excellent health for my age. But according to this document, this official-looking document with hospital letterhead and a physician's signature, I was dying. I sat there in my husband's home office, holding evidence that someone had created a fake medical history for me, taken out a massive insurance policy on my life, and submitted my obituary to the newspaper with a date of tomorrow. And the only name attached to any of it was David, my husband of 32 years. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there in my hands. The first anomaly had been 3 weeks ago. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. David had come home from work looking troubled, distracted. He'd barely touched his dinner, chicken parmesan, his favorite. And when I asked what was wrong, he'd said it was just a difficult case. Old client, he said. Estate dispute. Siblings fighting over their parents' money. You know how ugly that can get. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? David had been handling estates and trusts for 30 years. Ugly family fights were part of the job. But then, about an hour later, I'd walked past his study and heard him on the phone. His voice was low, urgent. I know the timeline, he was saying. I'm not an idiot. Everything has to be perfect. If there's any question about the cause, the whole thing falls apart. I'd assumed he was talking about the case, about some legal strategy. Now I wondered what he'd really been discussing. The second anomaly was more personal. 2 weeks ago, David had suggested we update our wills. We're not getting any younger, Maggie. We should make sure everything's in order. I'd agreed. It seemed reasonable. We'd met with his colleague, Robert Chen, who specialized in estate law. We'd reviewed our assets, our beneficiaries, our instructions for medical care. And at the end of the meeting, Robert had handed me a stack of documents to sign. These are standard updates, David had said. Nothing major, just making sure the language is current. I'd trusted him. I'd signed without reading every page. Now I was terrified to think about what I might have signed. I heard the garage door open at 6:15 p.m. I was sitting in the living room, waiting. The documents from David's drawer were hidden in my car, locked in the trunk. I'd put everything back exactly as I'd found it, relocked the drawer, and spent the rest of the day pretending to go about my normal routine while my mind raced through the possibilities. Maggie? David's voice echoed through the foyer. I'm home. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard him set his briefcase down, hang up his coat. The familiar sounds of 30 years of marriage. He appeared in the doorway of the living room, and I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in years, 60 years old, still handsome, still fit, with that same warm smile that had made me feel so safe all those decades ago. He was wearing the blue suit I'd bought him for his birthday, the one that matched his eyes. Those eyes looked at me now with nothing but affection, nothing but love. You okay? He asked. You look tired. Long day, I said, just thinking. He crossed the room and kissed my forehead. His lips were warm. His hand rested briefly on my shoulder. The gestures of a devoted husband. "Should I start dinner, or do you want to order in?" "Let's order in," I said. "I'm not up for cooking." "Thai?" "Sure." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through the delivery app. So casual, so normal. And all I could think was, this man wrote my obituary. This man is planning to kill me tomorrow. And he just kissed me on the forehead like nothing is wrong. I stayed calm. I needed proof. More proof than what I'd found. Because those documents raised questions, serious questions, but they weren't enough. A life insurance policy wasn't illegal. A medical document could have explanations. Even the obituary could be explained away as a misunderstanding, a prank, a mistake. If I was going to accuse my husband of planning my murder, I needed to understand the full picture. I needed to know how and when and who else was involved. And I had less than 24 hours to figure it out. That night, I lay next to David in the bed we'd shared for 3 decades and listened to him breathe. He fell asleep easily, the way he always did. Clear conscience, I used to think. A man with nothing to hide, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the darkness, running through scenarios, making plans. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to my study. I had a safe in the closet, a small fireproof box with a combination only I knew. Inside was my emergency fund, $15,000 in cash, my passport, the title to my car, and a burner phone I'd bought 3 years ago after reading an article about domestic violence resources. I'd never thought I'd need it. I'd bought it on a whim, telling myself it was just being prepared. Now I was grateful for my paranoia. I turned on the burner phone and created a new email account. Then I started documenting everything. I photographed the documents I'd found. I wrote down the details from my conversation with Gerald Hutchins at the Observer. I made a timeline of the anomalies I'd noticed over the past few weeks, and then I started thinking about who else might be involved. The medical report had come from Charlotte Presbyterian. That meant someone at the hospital had either created false records or been bribed to access the system. Either way, there was a trail. The life insurance policy had been underwritten by someone. There was a paper trail there, too. And then there was the estate planning meeting with Robert Chen. What had I actually signed that day? 3 threads to pull. 3 ways to uncover what was really happening. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help from someone I could trust completely. The problem was, I wasn't sure who that was anymore. At 6:30 a.m., I was back at Harper's Diner. Same booth, same order, same routine. But this time, I was watching the door. Thomas walked in at exactly 7 a.m. My brother was 4 years younger than me, with the same sharp jaw and skeptical eyes that ran in the Brennan family. We hadn't spoken in 4 years, not since our mother's estate had revealed just how much debt she'd left behind, and Thomas had accused me of hiding assets. He'd been wrong. I hadn't hidden anything. But he'd been grieving and angry, and I'd been too proud to fight for a relationship he didn't seem to want. Now I needed him. And when I'd called him at 5 a.m. and told him I thought someone was trying to kill me, he'd gotten in his car without a single question. "Maggie." He slid into the booth across from me. "Jesus, you look like hell." "Thanks. I found my own obituary in the paper yesterday." I told him everything. The obituary, the documents, the life insurance policy, the fake medical report, David's phone call. Thomas listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with every detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You're sure about this?" He finally said, "You're sure David is behind it? His name is on everything. The obituary, the insurance policy. That doesn't mean he's the only one involved." Thomas leaned forward. "Think about it, Maggie. David's a lawyer. He's careful. If he was really planning to murder you and collect on your insurance, would he be stupid enough to put his own name on everything?" I hadn't thought of that. "Someone else could be setting him up," Thomas continued. "Or someone else could be working with him. Who else benefits if you die?" The question hit me like a slap. "The business," I said slowly. "Holloway Insurance. If I die, my shares go to David, and then what? Who runs it?" I thought about Carla, David's daughter, my stepdaughter. She'd been working at the company for 12 years, climbing the ranks, waiting for her chance to take over. She'd never made a secret of her resentment toward me, never made a secret of her belief that she deserved more than what she had. "Carla," I said, "if David controls my shares, he can install Carla as CEO. She's been positioning herself for years. There's your motive, your husband and your stepdaughter working together to take everything you built." It made a horrible kind of sense. Carla had the operational knowledge. David had the legal expertise. Together they could orchestrate this. My death, the inheritance, the hostile takeover of my own company. But I still needed proof. "I need to get into those hospital records," I said. "Find out who created that false diagnosis." Thomas nodded. "And you need to see what you actually signed at that estate meeting. What if you signed something that gives David power of attorney? What if you signed something that changes your will?" The thought made me sick. "I know someone," Thomas said. "A private investigator, ex-FBI. She's good, and she's discreet. If anyone can untangle this in 24 hours, it's her. Can we trust her?" "I trust her with my life." He met my eyes. "And I trust you with mine. Whatever happened 4 years ago, Maggie, you're still my sister, and nobody is going to hurt you while I'm breathing." For the first time since I'd found that obituary, I felt something loosen in my chest. I wasn't alone. Rachel Okonkwo met us at a coffee shop in Noda at 9 a.m. She was younger than I expected, early 40s, with close-cropped natural hair and sharp, assessing eyes that reminded me of my own reflection. She'd spent 15 years with the FBI before going private, and Thomas had hired her 3 times over the past decade for various background checks and asset searches. "Show me what you have," she said, after Thomas made the introductions. I spread the documents on the table: the obituary, the life insurance policy, the fake medical report. Rachel studied them for several minutes, asking occasional questions. When was the policy taken out? Who was the physician on the medical report? Had I noticed anything unusual about my health recently? "Nothing," I said. "I had a physical 2 months ago. Clean bill of health. But according to this document, you were diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer 4 months ago." Rachel tapped the medical report. "That's a terminal diagnosis. Average survival time is 3 to 6 months. I don't have cancer." "I believe you, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like you do." She looked at me with those sharp eyes. "Here's what I think is happening. Your husband, or whoever is behind this, has created a narrative. You're dying of cancer. The insurance policy was taken out while you were still healthy. Then the fake diagnosis was created after the waiting period passed. When you die, it looks like natural causes. The insurance pays out, no questions asked. But I'm not actually sick. Any autopsy would show that." "Not necessarily." Rachel's voice was grim. "If the death looks natural, heart attack, stroke, complications from an existing illness. A lot of times they don't do a full autopsy, especially if the deceased's own medical records support the diagnosis, and especially if there's a grieving husband who doesn't want his wife's body violated. My husband. Grieving. Talking about how hard it was to watch me suffer, how grateful he was that I was at peace now. The image was so vivid I could almost see it. So what do I do? First, we verify the documents. Rachel gathered up the papers. I have contacts at Charlotte Presbyterian. I can find out who accessed the system to create this diagnosis. If it was done from inside the hospital, there's a trail. What about the estate documents? I signed something 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure what. You said the meeting was with Robert Chen? I know him. He's been David's colleague for years. Rachel paused. Is there any chance Robert is in on this? I hadn't considered that. But if David was working with Carla to steal my company, why not also have a corrupt lawyer helping cover the legal tracks? I don't know, I admitted. How do I find out what I signed without tipping David off? You don't. Rachel pulled out her phone. I do. I'll call Robert's office. Say I'm from a title company. Ask for verification of recent filings. If anything major was recorded, a new will, a power of attorney, a transfer of assets, I'll find it. What about the life insurance policy? I'll reach out to the underwriter, see if there were any irregularities in the application process. Sometimes when policies this size are taken out, the insurance company requires a medical exam. If you never took one, that's fraud right there. And the obituary? That's actually the easiest thread to pull. Rachel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Observer has electronic records of every submission, payment information, email addresses, IP addresses. If your husband submitted it from his home computer, we'll have proof. How long will all this take? I'll have preliminary answers by tonight. Full documentation by tomorrow morning. She looked at me steadily. The question is, can you stay safe until then? I thought about going home, sleeping next to David again, eating breakfast with the man who might be planning to kill me today. What's supposed to happen tomorrow? I asked. That's what I keep coming back to. The obituary was dated for November 15th. That's tomorrow. Whatever they're planning, it's supposed to happen before tomorrow's paper comes out. Which means it's supposed to happen today, Rachel said. Or tonight. The words hung in the air between us. Can you get away? Thomas asked. Stay somewhere else until we figure this out? If I disappear, they'll know something's wrong. They'll change their plans, cover their tracks. I shook my head. No. I need to act normal. Keep my routine. Let them think everything is going according to plan. That's dangerous, Maggie. I know. I met my brother's eyes. But I didn't build a company from nothing by being afraid. And I'm not going to let these people take everything I've worked for without a fight. I went to the office that day. Holloway Insurance Group occupied the top floor of a building in South Park. 23 employees, ranging from account managers to claims specialists to administrative staff. I'd hired most of them myself, trained them, watched them grow into their roles. The company was my legacy, the thing I'd created when I had nothing, nurtured when it was fragile, and built into something that would last. And someone was trying to take it from me. Carla was already at her desk when I arrived. She'd been with the company for 12 years, starting as an assistant account manager and working her way up to senior vice president of operations. It was a title I'd given her 5 years ago, partly because she'd earned it, and partly because I thought it might finally make her see me as something other than the woman who'd replaced her mother. It hadn't worked. "Morning, Maggie." She didn't look up from her computer. "David mentioned you weren't feeling well yesterday." I froze. "What?" "He called last night. Said you'd been having headaches, trouble sleeping. He's worried about you." Setting the stage, I realized. Laying the groundwork for a sudden decline. A medical emergency that everyone would later say they saw coming. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired. Nothing serious." "You should probably see a doctor." Now she looked up, and there was something in her eyes. Concern, but also something sharper. Calculation. "You're not as young as you used to be. These things can sneak up on you." "I'll keep that in mind." I walked to my office and closed the door. My hands were shaking again. David was telling people I was sick. He was creating witnesses who would later testify that yes, Maggie had seemed unwell. Yes, they'd noticed the signs. Yes, her sudden death, while tragic, wasn't entirely unexpected. I thought I was finished. I wasn't. I sat at my desk and pulled up my email. Normal. I needed to act normal. I reviewed reports, answered messages, sat through a conference call about renewal rates, all while watching the clock, waiting for Rachel to call, wondering what was going to happen tonight. At noon, David texted me. "Lunch? I can pick up something." My heart pounded. Was this it? Was he going to poison my food? No, that was paranoid. He couldn't act that quickly, not with witnesses, not at my own office. But I wasn't taking any chances. "Sorry," I texted back, swamped with work. "I'll grab something at my desk." 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then, "Okay, don't work too hard. Love you, love you." 32 years of those words. 32 years of believing them. I set down my phone and tried to focus on work. That afternoon, something changed. I was in a meeting with our CFO, reviewing quarterly projections, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "A Dr. Marcus Webb from Charlotte Presbyterian. He says he's your oncologist." The room went silent. My CFO, Janet Reyes, looked at me with sudden concern. "I'll be right there," I said. I found Dr. Webb in the reception area. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and a professional demeanor. He stood when he saw me and extended his hand. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm so sorry to drop by unannounced, but you missed our appointment this morning, and I couldn't reach you by phone." I had no appointment. I had no oncologist. I had never seen this man before in my life, but I played along. "I apologize, Dr. Webb. It's been a hectic day. Why don't we step into my office?" I led him past my assistant's desk, past the open floor where a dozen employees were pretending not to watch, and into my private office. I closed the door. "All right," I said. "Who are you? And who sent you?" Dr. Webb's professional mask flickered. "I'm not sure what you—" "I don't have cancer. I've never been diagnosed with cancer. I've never been to Charlotte Presbyterian. So either you're in on this, or someone is using your name without your knowledge." He stared at me for a long moment. Then his shoulders slumped. "I was afraid of this," he said quietly. "Mrs. Holloway, may I sit down?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "My name is Marcus Webb," he said. "I am a real oncologist at Charlotte Presbyterian. But I've never treated you. I've never even met you before today." "Then why are you here?" "Because 3 days ago, someone added a patient to my roster. A Margaret Holloway with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Complete medical history, diagnosis notes, treatment records. Everything. I didn't question it at first. We see a lot of patients. It's not unusual for referrals to come in without my direct involvement. But then I got a call from a woman claiming to be from an insurance company. She was verifying the diagnosis for a policy claim, and the questions she asked made me suspicious. Rachel. It had to be Rachel. What kind of questions? She asked about the date of initial diagnosis. She asked about treatment protocols. And then she asked if I'd ever personally examined the patient. He met my eyes. I hadn't. The record said I had, but I hadn't. So I pulled up the file, and I found that someone had accessed our system from an external IP address and created the entire patient record. Do you know who? Not yet, but I reported it to hospital administration, and they're investigating. He paused. Mrs. Holloway, I also found something else in the records. Something that made me come here today instead of just calling the police. What? There's a prescription attached to your file, a medication called digoxin. It's a heart medication, powerful and potentially fatal in high doses. The prescription was filled 2 days ago at a pharmacy on Park Road. My blood ran cold. I never picked up any prescription. Someone did. Someone using your name and date of birth. Dr. Webb leaned forward. Mrs. Holloway, digoxin poisoning can mimic cardiac arrest. If someone who's been diagnosed with terminal cancer suddenly dies of heart failure, it wouldn't raise many questions. The cancer would be blamed. The digoxin might not even be tested for. Unless someone knew to look. Exactly. He stood. I've already reported the prescription fraud to the Board of Pharmacy. I wanted to warn you personally, because... He hesitated. Because whoever did this was very thorough. They knew what they were doing, and they clearly intended for you to die in a way that looked completely natural. I stayed calm. I needed proof. The phrase kept running through my head like a mantra as I thanked Dr. Webb and walked him to the elevator. I needed to stay focused. I needed to keep gathering evidence. But the walls were closing in. Someone had created a fake medical history. Someone had obtained a dangerous medication in my name. Someone had submitted my obituary to the newspaper, and all of it pointed to tonight. I went back to my office and called Rachel. I was about to call you, she said. I found something big. So did I. A doctor from Charlotte Presbyterian just showed up at my office. He says someone created my entire patient record from an external IP address. I know. I'm the one who called his office to verify the diagnosis. When he couldn't give me details about treating you, I knew something was wrong. Rachel's voice was tight. But that's not the big news. The big news is what I found at the courthouse. The estate documents? Your husband filed a new power of attorney last week. It gives him complete control over your medical decisions and your assets if you become incapacitated. I never signed that. Your signature is on it, but it's not your handwriting. Rachel paused. They also filed an amendment to your will. It removes your brother as a beneficiary and gives everything, including your shares of Holloway Insurance, directly to David. I felt like I was falling. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, gone with a forged signature and a corrupt lawyer. There's more, Rachel said. See, the insurance policy? The $2 million one? The application includes a medical exam from 6 months ago. But I talked to the examiner listed on the form, and she has no record of ever examining you. It's all fake. Every document. Which means they've committed fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Rachel's voice softened. Maggie, we have enough to go to the police. We should get you somewhere safe and... No, Maggie. If we go to the police now, David and Carla will lawyer up. They'll destroy evidence, claim it was all a misunderstanding, blame each other. I'll spend years in court trying to prove what they did, and in the meantime, they'll have control of my company. What are you suggesting? I thought about the obituary, the fake medical records, the digoxin prescription, the forged signatures. They had planned this for months. They had created an elaborate system designed to steal everything from me and leave me dead with no one the wiser. They thought I was finished, I said slowly. They were wrong. I'm going to make them confess, and I'm going to make sure the whole world sees it. I left the office at 5 p.m., same as always, but I didn't go home. I drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of Charlotte, the one where I kept my mother's things, the boxes I'd never had the heart to go through after she died. Thomas was waiting for me in the parking lot. Rachel called, he said. She told me about the forged documents, the medication. What's the plan? David is going to make his move tonight. He has to. The obituary was supposed to run tomorrow. If I'm still alive when the paper comes out, questions will be asked. So what do? We let him make his move, and we catch him in the act. Thomas stared at me. That's insane. You're talking about letting your husband try to kill you. I'm talking about being prepared. I pulled out the burner phone. Rachel is going to be monitoring my location. If anything happens, she'll call the police. But I need David to commit to his plan. I need him to believe everything is going according to schedule. And then what? Then I spring the trap. I got home at 6:30 p.m. David was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. There you are, he said, smiling. I thought you might like a home-cooked meal tonight. You've seemed tired lately. That's thoughtful. I set down my purse and walked toward him, watching his hands, watching what went into the food. It's nothing fancy, just that chicken stir-fry you like. Smells wonderful. He poured me a glass of wine, red, my favorite, and set it on the counter. You first, I said with a smile. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Suspicion? What? A toast. I picked up the glass and held it out to him. To us. 32 years. Pour yourself a glass. I'm still cooking. David, pour yourself a glass. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached for the wine bottle and poured himself a glass. We clinked. He drank first. I watched him swallow. Then I set my glass down without drinking. I'm not very hungry, I said. Long day. I think I'll just go lie down for a while. Maggie, wake me when dinner's ready. I walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs to our bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. I had just called his bluff. He knew I suspected something. The question was what he would do next. At 8 p.m., David knocked on the bedroom door. Maggie, dinner's ready. I'm not hungry. A pause. You need to eat something. You've barely had anything all day. I'll get something later. I have a headache. Another pause. Then, okay, I'll leave a plate in the fridge for you. I heard his footsteps retreat down the stairs. A few minutes later, I heard the TV in the living room. Some sports game, the same thing he watched every night. Normal. Everything normal. But I knew it wasn't. I lay in bed with my eyes open, listening. The burner phone was under my pillow, set to silent. Rachel had texted me 20 minutes ago. In position outside your house. Backup standing by. Thomas was parked at the end of the street, watching. All I had to do was wait. At 11 p.m., David came to bed. I pretended to be asleep, my breathing slow and even. He moved around the room quietly, using the bathroom, changing into his pajamas, setting his phone on the nightstand. Then he got into bed beside me. For a long time, nothing happened. I lay there in the darkness, listening to his breathing, waiting. At midnight, he got up. I heard him move through the room, heard him open his nightstand drawer, the one where he kept his reading glasses and a notepad. Something rattled. A pill bottle? I stayed perfectly still. He came around to my side of the bed. I felt him standing over me, looking down. "Maggie?" His voice was soft. "Are you awake?" I didn't answer, didn't move. A long pause. Then I felt his hand on my shoulder, gently shaking me. "Maggie, wake up. I need to talk to you." I opened my eyes. He was standing there in the darkness, holding something small in his hand. A pill bottle. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice sleepy. "I found these in your purse," he said. "Digoxin. The label says they're prescribed to you." My blood ran cold. He'd planted them. He'd put the pills in my purse while I was sleeping, and now he was pretending to find them. "I don't know what that is," I said. "It's a heart medication, a strong one." His voice was concerned, perfectly, convincingly concerned. "Maggie, why do you have these? Have you been to a doctor?" The trap was closing. He was going to claim I'd been secretly medicating myself, that I was sicker than anyone knew, that when I died of cardiac arrest, it would be my own doing, an overdose, accidental or otherwise. I sat up slowly. "David," I said, "put the bottle down. I'm worried about you." "Put the bottle down, David." Something changed in his face. The mask of concern flickered just for an instant. "What's going on with you?" he asked. "You've been acting strange all day." "I know what you did." Silence. "I found my obituary in the paper yesterday," I continued. "The one you submitted 3 days ago, dated for tomorrow. I found the life insurance policy, $2 million in my name, with you as beneficiary. I found the fake medical records at Charlotte Presbyterian. I know about the forged power of attorney and the amended will." His face went pale. "And I know about the digoxin," I said. "The prescription that was filled in my name 2 days ago. The medication that would make my death look like natural heart failure. Maggie, was it going to be tonight? Were you going to slip it into my dinner? Into my wine?" "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stood up, facing him. "You were going to murder me and make it look like I died of cancer. You were going to collect $2 million in insurance and take control of my company. And you were going to get away with it." "Maggie, please." "Who else is involved? Carla? Robert Chen?" His mouth opened, but no words came out. That's when I heard the footsteps on the stairs. Carla appeared in the doorway. She was dressed in black, her face cold and composed. In her hand was a syringe. "I told you to wait in the car," David hissed. "I heard the talking. I knew something was wrong." Carla's eyes were fixed on me. "She knows." "I know everything," I said. "The police are on their way." Carla laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. "No, they're not. You came home alone. Nobody followed you. We've been watching." "Then how do you explain this?" I pulled out the burner phone and showed them the screen. The call was connected, had been connected for the past 5 minutes. "Rachel Okonkwo," I said. "Private investigator. She's been listening to everything, and she's already called 911. David's face crumpled. Carla lunged at me, but I was faster. I threw myself backward, grabbed the lamp from the nightstand, and swung it at her head. She went down. David didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. "You were supposed to be dead," he whispered. "Everything was perfect. How did you—" "The obituary was published a day early," I said. "Your perfect plan had a glitch." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "It's over, David." He looked at Carla, unconscious on the floor. He looked at the pill bottle still clutched in his hand. He looked at me. Then he said something that stopped my heart. It was Carla's idea. All of it. She came to me 6 months ago, said she knew a way to get everything we deserved. The company, the money, all of it. I told her no. I told her I loved you. And yet here we are. She had evidence. His voice broke. Evidence that I'd been gambling, that I owed money, a lot of money, to people who don't take no for an answer. She said if I didn't go along with her plan, she'd tell you. She'd tell everyone. She'd destroy me. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness. Nothing that simple. But a flicker of understanding. "How much do you owe?" 300,000, maybe more. I don't know anymore. He was crying now. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought if I just went along with what she wanted, maybe she'd change her mind. Maybe I could find another way. "So you were going to let your daughter murder me to pay off your gambling debts?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The sirens were right outside now. Blue and red lights flashed through the bedroom window. "Get on your knees," I said. "Hands behind your head." He obeyed. I stood there in my own bedroom, watching my husband kneel on the floor while his daughter lay unconscious beside him, and I waited for the police to arrive. 32 years of marriage, 32 years of trust. And it had taken less than 32 hours to destroy. The police arrested David and Carla that night. But I wasn't satisfied with arrests. I wanted proof, documented, witnessed, undeniable proof that would hold up in court and make sure neither of them ever walked free. So while they sat in separate cells, I started building my case. The first thread was the hospital records. Dr. Marcus Webb became my unexpected ally. He'd already reported the unauthorized access to Charlotte Presbyterian's administration, and within 24 hours, the hospital's IT department had traced the breach to an external IP address. That IP address belonged to Robert Chen's law firm. Robert Chen, David's colleague. The man who had sat across from me at that estate meeting handed me documents to sign and smiled while I unknowingly authorized my own destruction. He used the firm's VPN to access the hospital system, Rachel explained when she called me the next morning. They found his login credentials all over the network logs. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Can we prove he knew what he was doing? Better than that. I found emails between him and Carla going back 8 months. They planned the whole thing together. The fake medical records, the forged signatures, the insurance policy, all of it. What about David? The emails show he was reluctant at first. Carla had to push him. But once he agreed, he was in all the way. He even suggested the digoxin as the method. My husband. The man who'd kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. He'd helped choose the poison that was supposed to kill me. The second thread was the insurance fraud. The $2 million policy had been underwritten by Hartford Mutual Life, one of the biggest insurance companies in the country. Rachel contacted their fraud investigation unit and laid out everything we'd found. Within 48 hours, Hartford had opened a full investigation. They discovered that the medical exam listed on my application, the one that supposedly showed I was in good health 6 months ago, had been faked. The examiner's signature was forged. The entire document was fraudulent. "This is a big deal," the Hartford investigator told me when she called. "Insurance fraud is a federal crime, and in cases like this, where there's clear intent to collect on a death benefit, we're talking about conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain." What does that mean legally? It means the feds are getting involved. This isn't just a state matter anymore. I hung up the phone and felt, for the first time, like the tide was turning. The third thread was the estate documents. Thomas had contacted a forensic handwriting analyst, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okafor, who had testified in hundreds of court cases. She examined the power of attorney and the amended will that Robert Chen had filed. "The signatures are close," she told me when she delivered her report. "Close enough to fool a casual observer, but there are clear differences in the letter formations, the pressure patterns, and the pen angle. These signatures were forged by someone who studied your handwriting but didn't get it quite right." "Can you say that definitively in court?" "Absolutely. I've already prepared my expert testimony." 3 threads. 3 irrefutable chains of evidence. Now I needed to bring them all together in a way that would leave no room for doubt. The arraignment was scheduled for 3 weeks after the arrest. But I wasn't going to wait 3 weeks. The court of public opinion moves faster than the court of law, and I wanted everyone to know what David and Carla had done. So I planned something different. Holloway Insurance Group held an annual shareholders meeting every November. We'd been doing it for 20 years. A formal gathering where I presented the year's results, discussed the company's direction, and answered questions from our investors. This year's meeting was scheduled for November 28th, 2 weeks away. I invited everyone: shareholders, employees, board members, clients, press. I told them there would be a major announcement about the future of the company. I didn't tell them what it was. The 2 weeks leading up to the meeting were the longest of my life. David and Carla had both been released on bail, $500,000 each, pending trial. Robert Chen had been arrested separately on fraud charges and was cooperating with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. I had a restraining order against all 3 of them, but that didn't stop David from trying to reach me. The letters started arriving 3 days after his release. "Maggie, please, let me explain. I know you're angry, but you don't understand what I was going through. Carla manipulated me. She threatened me. I never wanted to hurt you. Please just give me a chance to explain." I burned them without reading past the first paragraph. Then came the phone calls. Not to me directly, but to mutual friends, to colleagues, to anyone who might relay a message. David says he's devastated. He says this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. He says Carla was the one behind everything, and he was just trying to protect you from her. The lies were so predictable, so pathetic, that I almost laughed. But the worst was the interview. 5 days before the shareholders' meeting, Carla went on a local news program to tell her side of the story. She sat there in a modest dress, her eyes red from crying, and told the audience that she was the real victim. "My stepmother has always resented me," she said, dabbing at her tears with a tissue. "She never accepted me as part of the family. When she found out about Dad's gambling problem, she saw an opportunity to get rid of both of us. She's the one who forged those documents. She's the one who created the fake medical records. She's trying to steal the company and frame us for crimes we didn't commit." It was a masterful performance. Convincing, sympathetic, designed to make me look like a vengeful monster. And for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if anyone would believe her. Then I remembered everything I had: the emails, the IP logs, the expert testimony, the insurance company's investigation. I had truth on my side, and truth, properly documented, is the most powerful weapon in the world. November 28th arrived. The shareholders' meeting was held at the Charlotte Convention Center, in one of the large conference halls that could accommodate 300 people. I'd arranged for full audio-visual equipment, multiple screens, and a direct feed to our company's website, so employees who couldn't attend in person could watch live. I'd also invited the press. Every major news outlet in Charlotte had a reporter in attendance. Several national outlets had sent correspondents as well. The story had been picking up attention ever since Carla's interview. I stood backstage, reviewing my notes one final time. Thomas was beside me. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready since the moment I found that obituary. No matter what happens today, I'm proud of you." I looked at my brother. This man I'd pushed away 4 years ago over something so petty I could barely remember it now. "Thank you for being here," I said. "I couldn't have done this without you. That's what family's for." He squeezed my shoulder. "Now go show them who you are." I walked out onto the stage at exactly 10 a.m. The room was packed. Shareholders in the front rows, employees clustered toward the back, press arranged along the sides with their cameras and microphones. The buzz of conversation died as I approached the podium. For a moment, I just stood there, looking out at the faces. People I'd worked with for years. People who had trusted me with their investments, their careers, their futures. People who deserved to know the truth. "Good morning," I said. "Thank you all for coming. I know there's been a lot of speculation over the past few weeks about what's happening at Holloway Insurance Group, and I want to address that directly." I paused, letting the silence stretch. 3 weeks ago, I found my own obituary in the Charlotte Observer. It was dated for the following day. According to that obituary, I was supposed to be dead. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I didn't die. Obviously. I'm standing here in front of you. But that obituary wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a prank. It was part of a carefully planned conspiracy to murder me, collect $2 million in life insurance, and take control of the company I built. The murmur became louder. I raised my hand for silence. Over the next hour, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened. I'm going to show you the evidence, documents, emails, expert testimony, official investigation reports, and I'm going to name the people responsible. I turned to the screen behind me. Let's start at the beginning. The presentation took 90 minutes. I showed them everything. The fake medical records at Charlotte Presbyterian, the forged signatures on the estate documents, the fraudulent life insurance application, the emails between Carla and Robert Chen discussing how to make my death look natural, the digoxin prescription filled in my name without my knowledge. I showed them the analysis from Dr. Patricia Okafor, explaining in precise detail how the forgeries had been identified. I showed them the report from Hartford Mutual's Fraud Investigation Unit. I showed them the statement from Dr. Marcus Webb describing how he'd discovered the unauthorized patient records. And I showed them the emails from David. Not all of them. Some were too detailed, too incriminating, better left for the courtroom. But enough to prove that he'd been fully aware of the plan, fully complicit in its execution, and fully prepared to watch me die. "We need to make it look natural," one email read. "If there's any question about the cause, the insurance won't pay out. The digoxin is perfect. It mimics cardiac arrest, and her fake cancer diagnosis means no one will look twice." That email was projected on a 20-foot screen, and 300 people read it in silence. When I finished, I set down my notes and looked out at the audience. I've been asked, over the past few weeks, why I didn't simply let the legal system handle this. Why I felt the need to bring all of this into the public eye. I paused. The answer is simple. For 32 years, I trusted my husband. I trusted his daughter. I trusted the lawyer who handled our legal affairs. And they used that trust to try to steal everything I'd built and leave me dead in my own bed. My voice was steady, clear, calm. I spent 27 years building this company. I started with nothing, and I created something that employs dozens of people and serves thousands of clients. I did it through hard work, integrity, and the support of people who believed in me. I looked at Thomas, standing in the wings. At Janet Reyes, my CFO, in the front row. At the faces of employees I'd hired and mentored and watched grow. That trust, the trust that built Holloway Insurance Group, was the same trust that my husband tried to exploit. He believed I was naive. He believed I was weak. He believed I would never question him, never suspect him, never look too closely at what he was doing. I shook my head. He was wrong. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the questions started. Reporters shouted over each other, trying to get my attention. Shareholders demanded to know about the company's future. Employees wanted reassurance that their jobs were safe. I held up my hand. I'll take questions one at a time, starting with you. I pointed to a reporter in the front row. Mrs. Holloway, what are the legal consequences for those involved? David Holloway and Carla Withers have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. Robert Chen has been charged with fraud and conspiracy and is currently cooperating with investigators. The FBI is involved due to the interstate nature of the insurance fraud. I expect all 3 to face significant prison time. What about the company? Will Holloway Insurance survive this? Absolutely. The company's finances are sound, our client relationships are strong, and our employees have shown incredible dedication during this difficult time. I've already begun the process of restructuring leadership to ensure continuity. Do you have any message for your husband? I looked directly into the camera. David, if you're watching this, I want you to know something. You had 32 years to be honest with me, 32 years to ask for help, to tell me about your problems, to trust me the way I trusted you. You chose not to. You chose to lie, to steal, to conspire in my murder. And now you're going to pay the price. I turned back to the audience. Any other questions? The meeting ended at noon. Within an hour, every major news outlet in the country was running the story. Insurance executive foils own murder plot. Husband and stepdaughter charged in elaborate scheme. Fake obituary leads to criminal conspiracy. By evening, the story had gone international. I received interview requests from outlets I'd never heard of, in languages I couldn't read. I declined them all. Instead, I went home. Not to the house in Myers Park, which was now a crime scene and would eventually be sold, but to a small apartment I'd rented in the Dilworth neighborhood. Clean, quiet, anonymous. Thomas met me there with takeout from Harper's Diner. Chicken parmesan, David's favorite. I didn't ask why he'd ordered it. I just ate. How are you feeling? He asked. Tired, relieved, angry. I set down my fork. I keep thinking about all the times I looked at him and didn't see it. 32 years, Thomas. How do you share your life with someone for that long and not know who they really are? People are complicated, and some people are very good at hiding. He wasn't hiding. He was right there in plain sight. I just didn't want to see. Thomas was quiet for a moment. You know, when you called me that morning at 5 a.m., I almost didn't answer. I was still angry about Mom's estate, still hurt. I thought you were calling to apologize, and I was ready to tell you to go to hell. Why didn't you? Because something in your voice stopped me. You sounded scared, and I realized that whatever had happened between us, you were still my sister. And if you were scared, I needed to help. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry, I said. About the estate, about the fight, about the 4 years of silence. I was wrong. We were both wrong. He squeezed my fingers. Let's not do that again. Deal. The next morning, I received a call from an unexpected source. Mrs. Holloway? This is Michael Holloway, David's son, Carla's brother, my stepson, whom I'd helped raise since he was 12 years old. Michael, I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't expect to hear from you. I know. His voice was thick, emotional. I've been watching the news, reading the reports. I had no idea, Maggie. I swear to you, I had no idea what they were planning. I believe you. And I did. Michael had always been different from Carla. Kinder, more genuine, less consumed by ambition. He'd moved to Portland years ago, started his own business, built a life completely separate from the family drama. I wanted to apologize, he said, for my father, for my sister, for everything. You don't owe me an apology. You weren't involved. But I should have seen it. I knew Carla was obsessed with the company, with getting what she thought she deserved. I knew Dad had problems, the gambling, the debts. I should have said something. You didn't know they'd go this far. No one could have known that. A long pause. Maggie, I want you to know, I'm not going to stand by them. I'm not going to make excuses for what they did. If you need me to testify, I will. If there's anything I can do to help, I will. Thank you, Michael. That means more than you know. The trial started 4 months later. I won't go through all the details. The legal process was exhaustive, grueling, and at times deeply painful. But the outcome was what mattered. David was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. During his testimony, he tried multiple times to blame Carla, to paint himself as a victim of manipulation. The jury didn't buy it. Carla was convicted of the same charges, plus attempted murder for her role in procuring the digoxin and attempting to inject me with it on the night of the arrest. She received 30 years. Robert Chen pleaded guilty to fraud and conspiracy in exchange for a reduced sentence of 7 years. He also lost his law license and was required to pay $850,000 in restitution. Hartford Mutual recovered the premiums paid on the fraudulent life insurance policy and donated a portion to a nonprofit organization that helps victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. And me? I kept building. Holloway Insurance Group didn't just survive the scandal. It thrived. The publicity brought attention to our reputation for integrity, our commitment to our clients, our resilience in the face of adversity. Within a year, we'd grown by 30%. I promoted Janet Reyes to CEO and stepped back from day-to-day operations. Not because I was tired of the work, but because I'd realized something important. I'd spent 30 years building a company, and not nearly enough time building a life. Thomas and I repaired our relationship. We talked about our mother, about our childhood, about all the years we'd lost to pride and misunderstanding. He became my closest confidant, my most trusted advisor. I never remarried. I never even dated. Not because I'd given up on love, but because I'd learned to value my own company more than I'd ever valued anyone else's. 1 year after the trial, I went back to Harper's Diner. Same booth, same order. Black coffee, wheat toast, scrambled eggs. The Charlotte Observer was spread out on the table in front of me, but this time I didn't look at the obituaries. I looked at the front page, where there was a story about a new community center opening in Asheville, funded by a donation from the Brennan Family Foundation, an organization I'd started with Thomas. I looked at the business section, where Holloway Insurance Group was mentioned as one of the top-performing independent brokerages in the Southeast. I looked at my own hands, wrapped around the coffee cup, and I thought about everything they'd built. Linda, the waitress who'd served me for 19 years, came by with the pot. "Refill, Mrs. Holloway?" "Please." She poured, then hesitated. "I heard about what happened," she said. "All that stuff with your husband. I'm sorry." "Don't be, I'm not." She looked at me with something like admiration. "You know, I always thought you were the toughest person I'd ever met. Coming in here every Thursday morning, no matter what. Business meetings, bad weather. That time you had the flu, nothing stopped you. Consistency matters. It's how you build anything worth having." "I guess so." She smiled. "But I think it's more than that. I think you just don't know how to quit." I laughed. A real laugh. The kind I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. "Maybe you're right. If you're still with me, if you've listened to this whole story, I want to leave you with something." I found my own obituary in the newspaper, dated for the day I was supposed to die. And instead of panicking, instead of running, instead of falling apart, I did what I'd always done. I made a plan. I gathered evidence. I built a case. I found people I could trust, and I relied on them when I couldn't do it alone. And in the end, I won. Not because I was smarter than the people who tried to destroy me, not because I was luckier, but because I refused to be a victim. The people in your life who are supposed to love you, supposed to protect you, supposed to have your best interests at heart, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're the ones with the knife in their hand. But here's what I learned. You don't have to die because someone wrote your death announcement. You don't have to lose everything because someone decided to take it from you. You don't have to accept the role they've assigned to you. You can fight back. You can demand proof. You can stay calm when everything is falling apart and say, "This isn't how my story ends," because it's your story, not theirs, yours, and you get to decide how it ends. For months, I asked myself, what was the first warning sign? When did David cross the line from a struggling husband into a man capable of planning my murder? I think I finally figured it out. It wasn't the gambling. A lot of people have addictions they're ashamed of, debts they hide, weaknesses they can't face. That doesn't make them killers. It wasn't even the secrecy. Marriage creates spaces where people hide things, small things, big things, things they think will protect the relationship if they stay buried. No, the turning point was something simpler, something I'd noticed years ago and dismissed as unimportant. David had stopped asking me questions. Not questions about my day or my work or my health, though those faded too. I mean real questions. The kind that show someone is interested in who you are, not just what you can give them. Early in our marriage, David was curious about everything. My childhood, my dreams, my fears. He wanted to understand how my mind worked, what made me laugh, what made me cry. He asked about the business, not because he wanted to know the financials, but because he wanted to know what drove me. Somewhere along the way, that curiosity died. I told myself it was just long-term marriage, that everyone settles into patterns, that familiarity breeds comfort, not contempt. I told myself it was normal, but it wasn't normal. It was the first sign that David had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an asset, something to be managed, something to be liquidated when the time was right. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: pay attention when someone stops being curious about who you are. Because that's when they stop caring about your future and start thinking only about what they can take from it. I hired a new lawyer after Robert Chen was arrested. Her name was Denise Marshall, and she came highly recommended by Rachel Okonkwo. She was in her 50s, black, with a no-nonsense demeanor, and a reputation for being one of the best estate attorneys in North Carolina. The first thing she did was review all the documents I'd signed over the past 5 years. "You were lucky," she told me after a week of analysis. "The forged power of attorney was sloppy. The notary seal was from a notary who died 2 years ago. Anyone who looked closely would have caught it. And the amended will was never actually filed with the probate court." Robert Chen told David it had been filed, but he was lying, probably hedging his bets in case the plan fell apart. So my original estate plan is still valid? Completely. Your assets, your company shares, everything. It's all exactly where you left it. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even known I was carrying. What about preventing something like this from happening again? Denise leaned back in her chair. That's the real question, isn't it? The truth is, there's no foolproof protection against someone you trust deciding to betray you. But there are safeguards. Separate attorneys for separate matters. Regular audits of financial documents. Digital alerts for any filings made in your name. Trusted family members or advisors who have oversight of your estate plan. Trust, but verify. Exactly. She smiled. You're already doing better than most of my clients. You learned the hard way, but you learned. 3 months after the trial, I got a letter from David. It was sent from the Federal Correctional Institution in Butner, where he was serving his sentence. The envelope was creased and worn, like he'd held it for a long time before sending it. "Dear Maggie, I know you probably won't read this. I know you have every reason to throw it away. But I had to try. I'm not going to make excuses. What I did was unforgivable. I know that now. I knew it then, too, even when I was telling myself that I had no choice. But I want you to understand something. Not to justify what I did. Nothing can justify it. But because I think you deserve to know the truth. I loved you. I still love you. That was never a lie. When Carla first came to me with her plan, I said no. I told her she was crazy, that I would never hurt you, that there had to be another way. I meant it. But she had evidence. She knew about the gambling, the debts, the people I owed money to. She knew things that could have destroyed me, destroyed both of us. She said if I didn't go along with her plan, she'd tell you everything. She'd tell the police. She'd make sure I went to prison anyway, but without any of the money to show for it. I was a coward. I was desperate. I made choices that I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that there were moments, many moments, when I almost told you everything. When I almost begged you to help me find another way. And every time I stopped myself. Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you'd look at me differently. Because I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes. I was a fool. And now I'm paying the price. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even expect you to write back. But I needed you to know that the man who loved you for 32 years was real. The man who tried to kill you was someone else. Someone I became when I lost my way. I'm sorry, Maggie, for everything. And I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer in my desk. I never responded. I never visited him in prison. I never spoke his name again unless legally required. But I kept the letter. Not because I forgave him, not because I believed his excuses. I kept it because I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember what it looks like when someone chooses weakness over courage, fear over honesty, destruction over the hard work of building something together. I wanted to remember so that I would never, ever let it happen again. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. The hardest part was afterward. The questions that haunted me in the middle of the night, the doubts that crept in when I was alone. Did I miss the signs? Was I naive? Was there something I could have done differently? I thought about those questions for months. I talked about them with Thomas, with my therapist, with Rachel Okonkwo over long dinners at her apartment. And eventually, I came to a conclusion. The answer to all three questions was yes and no. Yes, I missed signs. The phone call I overheard. The estate documents I signed without reading. The way David had gradually pulled away over the years. Those were all clues I could have followed. But no, I wasn't naive. I trusted my husband of 32 years. That's what marriage is supposed to be. You can't live your life in constant suspicion of the people closest to you. That's not love. That's paranoia. And no, there wasn't necessarily anything I could have done differently. Not without information I didn't have. David hid his problems from me. Carla planned in secret. Robert Chen covered their tracks. I was operating with incomplete information, and I made reasonable decisions based on what I knew. The betrayal wasn't my fault. That's the thing I had to learn, the thing that took longer than I'd like to admit. I didn't cause this. I didn't deserve this. I wasn't punished for some flaw in my character or failure in my judgment. Bad people do bad things. Sometimes those bad people are the ones you love most. And when that happens, you have two choices. You can let it break you, or you can let it teach you. I chose to learn. I want to tell you about one more moment. It was 6 months after the trial. I was at the Brennan Family Foundation Gala, our first major fundraiser. Standing at the edge of the room with a glass of champagne, I wasn't really drinking. The gala was beautiful. White linens, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing soft jazz. We'd raised over $400,000 for domestic violence shelters and financial literacy programs across North Carolina. But I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about the night I found my obituary. The night I lay awake in bed, listening to David breathe, wondering if I would survive the next 24 hours. I had survived. Not just survived, thrived. Built something new from the ashes of everything that had been destroyed. And yet, standing there in that beautiful room, surrounded by people who admired me and supported my work, I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. Not for David. I'd made my peace with losing him. Not for Carla or the family we'd never been. I grieved for the woman I used to be. The one who believed that love was enough. The one who trusted without question. The one who thought she knew her own husband. That woman was gone. She died on November 14th, the day I found my own obituary. And in her place was someone different. stronger maybe. Wiser, certainly, but also harder, more guarded, less willing to let people in. I wasn't sure if that was a victory or a defeat. Thomas found me on the terrace, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. "You okay?" "Just thinking." "About?" "Everything I lost, everything I built, whether it was worth it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You're asking whether it was worth it. Like there's some balance sheet where you can add up the good and bad and figure out if you came out ahead." He shook his head. "That's not how life works, Maggie. Life isn't about coming out ahead. It's about what you do with what you're given." "And what have I done?" "You survived. You built something beautiful from something terrible. You helped people who needed help. You proved that you're stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to you." He turned to face me. "That's worth more than any balance sheet could measure." I looked at my brother, this man I'd almost lost, this man who'd shown up when I needed him most. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from my big sister." He smiled. "She's a pain in the ass, but she knows a thing or two about resilience." I laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt genuine. I still go to Harper's Diner every Thursday morning. Same booth, same order. Black coffee, wheat toast, scrambled eggs. But now I do something different. Before I open the Charlotte Observer, I take a moment to appreciate where I am. The warm cup in my hands, the smell of coffee and bacon, the morning sunlight coming through the windows. I think about the person I was 5 years ago, before the obituary, before the betrayal, before everything changed. And I think about the person I am now. They're not the same. They can never be the same again. But that's okay, because the person I am now knows something the old me didn't. That trust is a gift you give, not an obligation you owe. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. That the people who try to destroy you only have power if you let them. I don't let them anymore. If you've made it this far, I have a question for you. Is there someone in your life you trust completely? Someone you'd stake your life on? I hope there is. I hope you never have to question that trust the way I did. But if you ever do, if you ever find yourself holding evidence that someone you love has betrayed you, I want you to remember this story. Stay calm. Gather proof. Find people you can trust. Build your case brick by brick, document by document, until you have something that can't be denied. And then spring the trap. Because you're not a victim. You're not helpless. You're not whatever story they've written for you. You're the author of your own life. And no one, not your spouse, not your family, not anyone, gets to write your obituary before you're ready. This is Margaret Holloway, signing off. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be facing their own betrayal, their own impossible moment. And remember, the day someone tries to end your story is the day you fight back. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. And I'm still here. 2 years later, the storage unit was exactly as I'd left it. I hadn't been back since that night. The night I'd met Thomas here to plan our strategy. The night before everything changed. Now, 2 years later, I finally felt ready to face what was inside. Boxes of my mother's things. Photographs, letters, old clothes. The accumulated debris of a life lived and ended. Thomas had offered to come with me, but I'd wanted to do this alone. I spent 3 hours going through boxes. Most of it went to charity. The clothes, the kitchenware, the books she'd never read. But some things I kept. A photograph of her and my father on their wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unaware of what was coming. A letter she'd written me when I graduated from Wake Forest, telling me she was proud of me, that I was going to do great things, that she'd always believe in me. And a small jewelry box containing her wedding ring. I sat on the cold concrete floor, holding that ring, and I cried. Not for David, not for my failed marriage, for my mother, for the life she'd lived and the sacrifices she'd made, for all the years she'd spent cleaning other people's houses so that I could build something of my own. She'd never met David. She'd died 3 years before I started Holloway Insurance. She'd never known that her daughter would one day be betrayed by the man she trusted most, would fight back, would win. But I think she would have been proud. I think she would have looked at everything I'd built, the company, the foundation, the life I'd created from nothing, and she would have smiled. "That's my girl," she would have said. "That's my Maggie." I slipped her ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. And then I locked up the storage unit, got in my car, and drove home. There's one more thing I want to tell you. A few weeks after I visited the storage unit, I received an unexpected visitor at the foundation office. It was Dr. Marcus Webb, the oncologist from Charlotte Presbyterian, who'd warned me about the digoxin, who'd helped expose the fake medical records, who'd been one of the first people to believe me when no one else did. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Please sit down." He settled into the chair across from my desk, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Make sure you were okay." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." "I'm glad." He paused. "I also wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For not catching it sooner. The fake records, the fraudulent prescription. If I'd been paying closer attention, if I'd noticed the irregularities before that insurance call." "Dr. Webb," I held up my hand. "You didn't create this situation. You didn't cause any of this. You're the one who helped me stop it. But I should have." "No." My voice was firm. "I've spent 2 years thinking about what everyone should have done, what I should have noticed, what David should have told me, what Carla should have realized about her own soul. And you know what I've concluded?" "What?" "That hindsight is useless. We make decisions with the information we have, and then we live with the consequences. You did everything right. You noticed something was wrong. You investigated. You warned me. You testified at the trial. Without you, I might not be here right now." He was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," he finally said. "I needed to hear that. We all need to hear it sometimes." I stood and extended my hand. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Webb, and thank you for everything you did." He shook my hand and left, and I sat there in my office, thinking about all the people who had helped me survive. Thomas, Rachel, Dr. Webb, Denise Marshall, Janet Reyes, Michael Holloway, who had testified against his own father and sister because it was the right thing to do. I hadn't done this alone. No one ever does, not really. The strength to fight back comes from within. But the ability to win, that comes from the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. I visit David once a year, not because I forgive him, not because I want to understand. I go because I need to remind myself that he's real, that the man who tried to kill me is flesh and blood, sitting in a federal prison, paying for what he did. It would be easy to turn him into a monster in my mind, to make him into something less than human. something I can hate without complication. But that would be a lie. And I've had enough of lies. David was human. He made human choices. He was weak and scared and desperate, and he let those weaknesses consume him. I refuse to do the same. So I sit across from him in the visiting room, and I look at his aging face, and I let myself feel whatever I feel. Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's sadness. Sometimes it's just emptiness. And then I leave. I get in my car. I drive back to Charlotte, and I remember that I'm free, and he's not. That's enough. If there's one thing I want you to take away from all of this, it's this. Your story isn't written yet. No matter what someone else has planned for you, no matter what obituary they've drafted, what ending they've decided you deserve, you have the power to change it. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. You'll have to be brave when you want to hide. You'll have to be calm when you want to scream. You'll have to trust people again, even when trust feels impossible. But you can do it. I know, because I did. I found my own obituary in the newspaper, dated for tomorrow, and I'm still here. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think, please share it. Leave a comment telling me about your own moment of resilience, the time you fought back when someone tried to write your story for you. And subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Stories about ordinary people who refuse to be victims. Stories about the evidence trail that leads to justice. Stories about surviving the unthinkable and coming out stronger on the other side. Because we're all writing our own stories every day, and the only ending that matters is the one we choose. Take care of each other. Margaret.